Thank you, Oksana. Hi, everyone. My name is Tanaj. I am the founder of Light to Life, as Oksana just mentioned, and I'm the lead researcher in They Are Survivors 2, Gender Responsive Programming for Justice Impacted Survivors of Intimate Partner Violence. So I would like to thank you all for taking the time to attend the International Criminology Conference, and thank you to the sponsors, Policy Studies Organization, as well as the International Journal on Criminology and the American Public University System. So I would like to start our session off today by showing you a short clip. And many folks may be familiar with this video I'm going to show you, because many folks may have heard of the story of Cyntoia Brown Long's case. And her case represents juvenile injustice that happened in Tennessee and across many other states. Cyntoia Brown Long was being prostituted, and she was charged and tried, as well as convicted as an adult for defending herself, and was given 60 years behind bars when she believed her life was endangered. So I'm going to show this clip in one moment, but as you watch this clip, I would like you all to consider the following, and feel free to write some stuff down, put it in the chat box. I want you to consider, how do you think that we can begin to shift mainstream attitudes about what a victim or a survivor looks like, and also looks like in our legal system? So I'm going to pull up my screen here, and I'm going to show you the video. Give me one moment. All right, so hopefully all of you can see that.
Roseanne, Alexis Martin, Crystal Kaiser, all of these women say they were sex trafficked as minors, and all of them faced a life behind bars for killing their alleged abusers.
This is State of Wisconsin versus Crystal Kaiser.
Crystal, now 22, is awaiting trial in Wisconsin. The state Supreme Court ruling this summer that she will be allowed to argue self-defense in court, setting a new precedent that could change the tide for sex trafficking victims.
I think it could potentially impact other states and lead them either to enact affirmative defense or defense provisions for survivors, or recognize the issue in some way.
It could have helped Cyntoia before a Tennessee judge handed her a life sentence in 2006.
I had the prosecutor in my case stand up and show a naked picture that my trafficker took of me to a jury as an indictment of its own. I was 18 when I went to trial, but I was 16 when he took it from me.
Her now famous story garnered celebrity attention in 2019 when she was granted full clemency by then Governor Bill Haslam after serving 15 years behind bars. Was Cyntoia just lucky, or is society's perception of sex trafficking victims truly changing since her incarceration?
So I'm hoping that that video maybe challenged your thoughts a little bit, as well as if you've never heard of Cyntoia Brown Long story, maybe opened your eyes and raised awareness on something that's very important that is often overshadowed when in conversations around mass incarceration, specifically for women. So studies have shown that girls in the juvenile justice system are often victims of physical and sexual abuse. In fact, 54% of girls incarcerated in the US juvenile correctional settings have been sexually abused, and 61% have been physically abused. And the majority of those girls have been abused multiple times. So now in Tennessee, a child is no longer considered a prostitute. they are considered a victim of sex trafficking. And this suggests that if Cyntoia would have been arrested today, she would have been looked at through a different lens. The same lens that I'm challenging all of you today to look through. There are 231,000 women currently incarcerated, and women's incarceration rates are continuing to grow faster than men's in many states. And with that being said, there are over 70% of women who are incarcerated for defending themselves against their abusers. And what we have found is that there is a major lack of programming to address women of color, as well as trans and non-binary people's trauma and mental health needs. So that is why today we're going to be shedding light through our research on the injustices that are faced by many women and the LGBTQ plus people who are justice impacted. So I encourage you all to take notes, ask questions in the chat, right? And engage in this conversation around our research that, again, is in partnership with From Prison Cells to PhD Women's Cohort. And the research called is They Are Survivors Too, Gender Responsive Programming for Justice Impacted Survivors. So as I mentioned, my name is Tanaj, and I'm wondering here, a lot of folks may be wondering who I am and what brought me to this field and why I do what I do. And I have very strong personal ties to the work that I do. And after surviving an abusive relationship at the age of 16 and being criminalized for defending myself against my abuser, and witnessing my mother be incarcerated over 18 times for her own victimization, I've made it an obligation and what I believe to be my calling to inform and build support networks and resources for survivors and justice impacted women, and ultimately to prevent women and girls from experiencing what my mom and I did at such a young age. And so while earning my master's in criminal justice and my license as a behavioral specialist, I really grew to understand the importance of bridging education, as well as mentorship and advocacy to truly create systematic change for marginalized communities like Black and Brown women survivors. And so that's why I founded Light to Life. And Light to Life is around building support networks, right? Creating educational programming that is essentially providing tools and resources to heal and to prevent domestic violence. And to date, I'm proud to say that Light to Life is a 2-time award-winning program and has served 400 plus justice impacted women survivors. And we partner with universities, nonprofit organizations, professionals, and private and public sectors where we're providing gender responsive, culturally affirming, and trauma-informed technical assistance and programming that's tailored to survivors and justice impacted women. Now, I can't do this work alone. It takes a village, and the village that we call is our dream team. So some of our dream team is here today and some of the dream team are not here today, but I do want to honor them as well. And the dream team here has been conducting and supporting this research. So I want to mention Dr. Stanley Andrees, who is not here today, but he is the founder of From Prison Cells to PhD, as well as the executive director, who we are partnering with on this research, as well as Avion Berry, who is a research assistant, as well as Keandra Harper, who is Light to Life's partnership manager. And now I want to pass it over to a couple of our other dream team members for them to introduce themselves. I'll pass it over to Tran first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tran Dang, and I am a research assistant on the Dream Team. I am a second-year medical student at Johns Hopkins. I joined this work because I'm passionate about improving women's health in the realm of medicine, and I wanted to be part of this project with Light to Life because it provides support and well-being for some of the most marginalized women in our communities. I'm excited to be here and to be presenting to all of you.
Thank you, Tran. So now we're going to pass it over to Talia.
Hi, I'm Talia Proshan. I'm a junior at Fieldston High School in New York City, and I joined the team because I'm passionate about using STEM for social justice and supporting this important work, and I'm super excited to be here presenting today.
Thank you, Talia. So many folks are probably wondering, well, what is the Prison Salsa PhD Women's Cohort? So the Women's Cohort is a division that has branched from Prison Salsa PhD Scholars Program. Essentially, from Prison Salsa PhD, and I'm going to be saying P2P for short throughout the presentation, is a national nonprofit organization that provides educational counseling, mentorship, as well as transitional housing to currently and formerly incarcerated people. The P2P's Women's Cohort is in partnership with Light to Life, and I'm currently serving as their Women's Cohort facilitator. And so since June of 2021, Light to Life's virtual programming and P2P's Women's Cohort has created inclusive and safe spaces for justice-impacted survivors by providing monthly survivor-centered workshops, our ambassador program, through healing justice approaches and resources that ultimately have been providing positive health outcomes. And here are a few photos of women who are members, as well as some tribe leaders who have been a part of the P2P's Women's Cohort. So since June of 2021, we've hosted 2 cohorts. We're going into our 3rd cohort starting January of 2023. And since then, we've had 479 women who have signed up for the program. And we have had 167 women who have invested over 40 hours addressing their trauma, learning tools to heal, and really building a connection to community through sisterhood. And so each member has completed 26 workshops and have completed 26 workbooks additionally. And most recently, this program has expanded, and our reach outside of our workshops has now created a national online forum, which essentially is a community that is built through a platform called Vibely. And this is led by justice impacted women who are our tribe ambassador leaders, where they co-lead wellness challenges and host structured support groups with each other. And so since June of 2021, what we've been doing is collecting data. We've been collecting feedback and qualitative data after each of our workshops. And what we have found is that over 50% of the women said since attending the workshops, they've noticed the following in their interpersonal changes, such as better communication, increased self-trust, more confidence in themselves. They feel more supported. They feel more equipped with tools, have more self-acceptance, self-awareness, peace, and ultimately feel less frustrated in their daily lives. This is a testimony from a woman named Judith, who is a Women's Cohort member. And in this testimony that Judith mentions here, incarceration has exacerbated underlying issues of trauma, and that she's realizing she's not alone in this. And what I want to further discuss is how there's historical examples of women who have had similar experiences, showing a lot of underlying issues as it relates to their ties to incarceration. And so the cycles of violence against women and incarceration is truly embedded in our national history. So with this understanding, it's important to know that history provides insight as well as understanding of our future. And it's important to have historical context from other women's stories. And the earliest one documented here is in 1855. You can see on this timeline here, an enslaved young woman named Celia, who in 1855 defended herself from a sexual assault from her master and was hung in Missouri. Marissa Alexander, a survivor of domestic violence from Jacksonville, Florida, who was prosecuted as well as threatened with 60 years in prison for defending herself against her abusive husband. Inez Garcia, who in 1974 defended herself from an attack and had to spend 2 years in Soledad State Penitentiary. And the alleged person who raped her was never charged. Cece McDonald, who in 2011 had to fight for her life against a racist and transphobic attack and was actually forced to serve 19 months in a male prison. So when women identify outside of heterosexuality or cisgender LGBTQIA+, they are even more susceptible to violent and hate crime. Transgender women are actually 4 times more likely to experience various forms of violence than cisgender women. My hope is that these women's stories, right, and their lives can provide a better understanding of how the history of early American law plays a factor into today. And early American law did not actually recognize rape or even sexual assault as a crime, right? And because slave owners would essentially be incentivized and monetized from the sexual exploitation of Black women and their offspring. So stories like Celia, as I mentioned before, right, in 1855, defending herself from a sexual assault, is happening still today in 2022. According to the ACLU, an estimated 56% of those women who are in prison have experienced abuse and report that that abuse included rape, and another 13% reported an attempted rape. Black women have been consistently excluded from protection by our legal system, and to protect themselves only really brought further trauma and extensive sentencing. So this can be seen in the rates of incarceration for Black women, rising 20% faster than the rate of their white counterparts. Black women are also subjected to longer sentencing times, almost double the amount compared to white women. So as you can see, and based off of this discussion and brief history, that history has only repeated itself. And now I would like to ask all of you and to think about, well, what are the other problems that are not being addressed?
Thanks, Tanaj. So I'll be discussing the problems that our research project is seeking to address and ultimately the problems that we're trying to alleviate. The first problem is that we need to consider the linkage between intimate partner violence, IPV, and incarceration. We must acknowledge the associations between IPV and incarceration as evidenced by the historical examples that Tanaj just discussed. And shortly, we'll be presenting some current data on the current picture of IPV and incarceration today. IPV is a global health crisis that disproportionately affects women. It's one of the leading forms of violence against women, and it's the cost behind more than half of the homicides perpetrated against women. These experiences of violence often leave women vulnerable to incarceration as a consequence of either protecting themselves against their abusers or being criminalized for being sex trafficked. Women who have experienced these forms of violence are not seen as victims or survivors in the carceral system. They're often labeled as deviant and dehumanized during and post-incarceration. They are excluded from protection under the law, and they are criminalized for their actions, even if it was for their own well-being or out of self-defense. And so when we provide care and programming to incarcerated women, we need to consider the ways that they have experienced violence and discrimination. This brings me to the second problem that we're addressing, the need for better trauma-informed and gender-responsive programming for currently and formerly incarcerated women. The programs that do exist currently do not center the voices of the women that they're trying to serve. Every woman has an individual story that has led them to where they are, and these experiences are not very often acknowledged by the justice system. This is why Light to Life programming is special in its efforts to center the voice of its participants. So as a result, the research project is seeking to investigate the impact of a unique program that centers the voice of impacted women. Within the goals of our research, we focus on women's physical and mental well-being. We'll go into more details of our intended research outcomes a little later. But in addition to centering the stories of participants, Light to Life is creating a community of women with similar life experiences who can confide in each other and celebrate their success together. Camilla Jones, another member of the women's cohort, details the uplifting energy of the cohort that she participated in. She says, it made me understand myself more, of who I was and what strengths and power I have over myself, and I gave myself the respect that I deserve. I had learned a lot of stuff that I did not know I could do, and because of this group, I'm a better person and respect myself more. The women's cohort is a unique space that justice impacted women need more than ever before. We believe through Light to Life's programming, we're addressing women's needs and unique experiences that they face during and after incarceration. Now I'll pass it on to Talia, who will discuss some data and past research that demonstrate the lack of support and programming for incarcerated women.
Thanks, Tran. The number of women impacted goes beyond those who are currently incarcerated and includes women on probation and parole. In total, there are 1.2 million women currently under supervision in the United States. And in addition, the female imprisonment growth rate has been twice as high as that of men since 1980, with it growing over 700% since then. The graph here shows the results of a 2018 study by the Office of the Inspector General of the U.S. Department of Justice, which concluded that the needs of incarcerated women are not being met. Though the Federal Bureau of Prisons adopted gender-responsive programs to address these needs, the study found that the Bureau lacked a strategic approach for supporting these women. 77% of incarcerated women have experienced intimate partner violence in their lifetime, a significant portion of that being Black women. And additionally, transgender women are 4 times more likely to experience various forms of violence. The pie charts here show the results of a 2018 survey conducted by the Oregon Justice Research Center in partnership with Portland State University. And it reports incarcerated women's experiences with domestic violence and childhood trauma in Coffee Creek Correctional Facility. More than half of the women surveyed had been emotionally, physically, or sexually abused in their youth and adulthood. In addition, many incarcerated women have children and have to worry about them from behind bars. There are over 1 million children with incarcerated parents. The bar graph shown is from a 2016 Prison Policy Initiative study, which found that over 50% of incarcerated women are a parent or guardian of a minor, and moreover, 39% of incarcerated women are single parents. On average, mothers only get to see their children 3 to 4 times a year, and these experiences can have long-lasting psychological impacts on children. We must also acknowledge that IPV has significant associations with not only incarceration, but chronic illnesses. I'm going to pass this over to Tran to speak more on this.
So the association between incarceration and IPV leads to numerous health consequences for incarcerated women. Like I said before, IPV is a global health crisis, and victims of IPV suffer from higher levels of both acute and chronic health conditions compared to the general population. For many survivors of IPV, the experiences of IPV and other forms of gender-based violence are tied to systems of incarceration. To put that into numbers, among the current population of incarcerated women, 77% have experienced IPV. And there's this misconception that victims of IPV only suffer from acute and visible presentations that are the result of physical abuse. As you can see here, victims of IPV do suffer acute injuries due to physical abuse, and this includes lacerations, fractures, and traumatic brain injuries. However, to say that IPV victims only have visible injuries is incorrect. And this misconception undermines the enormous impact that chronic health conditions can have on victims. Survivors of IPV have been shown to experience higher rates of various chronic conditions compared to the general population. These chronic conditions include asthma, diabetes, heart disease, and chronic pain. Experiencing IPV is also strongly associated with serious mental health outcomes such as depression, PTSD, and suicide. This association is supported by the finding that incarcerated women suffer from mental health problems to a higher degree than both incarcerated men and the general population. Additionally, IPV can result in poor pregnancy-related outcomes, including pregnancy-associated death of mother and/or child, preterm birth, low birth weight, and postpartum depression. Ultimately, the goal of this research project is to improve programming for incarcerated women and reduce incidences of IPV and incarceration, which in turn will reduce the negative health outcomes associated with these experiences. And in order to reduce the negative outcomes associated with IPV and incarceration, gender responsive programming during and after incarceration is needed. Women need gender responsive programming after incarceration for re-entry success and for physical and psychological well-being. However, re-entry programs and interventions historically only focused on recidivism as the primary indicator of success for formerly incarcerated people. Studies have shown that recidivism is not the primary way that formerly incarcerated women viewed success. So the analyses of re-entry interventions for women have found a lack of outcome measures other than recidivism. And there aren't very many outcome measures that include well-being, self-esteem, psychological symptoms, or substance use. And one specific study found that formerly incarcerated women measure their own success by other factors besides recidivism, such as success is having my own place, success is helping family and others, success is persevering. Many re-entry programs neglect the intersectionality of care for women of color who are survivors of IPV. There also remains a lack of robust networks of counseling and support for justice impacted and IPV survivors. The Women's Cohort programs fills the gap by providing national gender responsive support and trauma-informed programming to justice-impacted survivors. It centers the voices of individuals who are directly impacted by gender-based violence, mass incarceration, and structural racism. And so we seek to evaluate the impact of Light to Life programming for survivors of gender-based violence and of the carceral system. And so I'll pass it on to Talia to discuss in more detail the goals and the methodology of our research.
So the purpose of the study is to examine the experiences of participants in P2P's Women's Cohort, comparing the experiences of those who participated in Light to Life's workshops and programming to those who did not participate. And our goal is to learn lessons to improve Light to Life's programming, to scale them up and apply them to other similarly affected populations. Also to impact policies that can help improve resources and conditions for incarcerated women. This study will provide informative data for a future larger scale qualitative study that will further improve programming for this population. So we have a 4-step research plan. Step 1, we've already begun, which is recruiting women through emails and flyers. We're sending these to women who have signed up or participated in Light to Life's programs. Step 2 is conducting 40 separate 45 to 60-minute interviews with 20 women who attended 4 or more programs and 20 women who signed up for but never attended Light to Life's programs. Step 3 is analyzing the information and feedback we get from these interviews to turn the qualitative data into quantitative data. And step 4 will be to disseminate the information with goals in mind that I'll speak more about on the next slide. So increasing public awareness. We plan to create a national report and a website presenting our research findings. Influence prison policies as they relate to reducing mandatory minimum sentences for women incarcerated for defending themselves against their abusers. We want to shift the narrative, as we've spoken about, of how our legal system and society view survivors of intimate partner violence. They should be seen as survivors and not criminals. We want to create improved educational programs, use this research to approach women and juvenile facilities to improve their programming, to promote healing and increase positive health outcomes. And as a long-term goal, we hope to partner with P2P to have a transitional home for women where we can provide Light to Life's programming and support their reentry. We predict that members who participated in the women's cohort will show a satisfactory level of engagement with Light to Life's programming, a reduction in attitudes that accept violence in relationships, an increase in interpersonal and intrapersonal skills that lead to healthy relationships, overall well-being, and a reduction in substance abuse, compared to justice-impacted women who did not participate in the cohort. I'm going to pass it over to Tanaj to speak about who helped us with this process and conclude for today.
Thanks, Talia. So I'm hoping that from our discussion today and even from testimonies that we've shared and the stories that we've shared, that all of you understand that this is more than just doing research for research sakes. This is more than just a research project to us. Our hope is to really break down systematic barriers to ensure that all women and girls receive appropriate interventions to heal, to learn, to grow, and ultimately prevent victimization ties to incarceration. Chantel here, who is a women's cohort member, as well as a tribe ambassador leader, has said since joining the cohort that she's felt a sense of belonging. She feels safe, supported, and encouraged. And so that is why, one of the reasons amongst many as to why it's important to provide gender-specific programming that is evidence-based, culturally competent, as well as trauma-informed. It's about building safe, inclusive spaces where women, again, can heal and can have a connection to community through sisterhood, can learn and grow, and ultimately return to their families and their children with the tools and knowledge to feel empowered in their everyday lives. Now, as Tran and Talia have mentioned, right, our different goals. And with that, our overarching goals is truly to create opportunities for justice impacted survivors, to be recognized and to open doors where no other entry point may otherwise exist. And we hope through our research and Light to Life's programming in partnership with P2P that we can create a sense of empowerment and can equip women with tools to be leaders and advocates in their life. And with that, you know, we want to, as Talia mentioned, build a national online presence to raise awareness on this issue, have an impact on law and policy, and in the way that we view women's programming for women who are incarcerated, as well as for women who are returning. And so, as I mentioned, it takes a village. And so I always want to make sure that you give credit when it's due. And we would not be able to do this work and to conduct this research without the support of our collaborating organizations and faculty advisors and funding supporters. So we truly appreciate all of you for listening and being a part of this conversation. And I hope that you can share this within your network, with your colleagues, with your friends and families to continue this discussion. I encourage you all to take a picture of our contact information here as we continue to develop our research, and you can stay in the loop and see in other ways that you can support the work that we're doing or even support the women that we are serving. And so I will now leave the floor open to any questions that folks may have.
Yes, guys, please type your questions in the Q&A or chat section. And we will do our best to answer them. I know that all attendees are on mute, so we cannot hear them, but Q&A section and chat are for questions. So if you have any questions, please go ahead. That was very interesting. That's great work that you guys are doing.
Thank you. We're only getting started, so we have a lot of work to get ahead of us, but I'm hoping that folks were able to take some gems away from today and
Yes.
even think of how you can apply it in their own respective fields.
Well, we'll wait a couple more minutes in case there are any questions. If you
I
have,
will also put in the chat, sorry, Oksana, I'm gonna put in the chat contact information as well as website links for folks as well to learn more about the work we're doing.
yes. Well, it looks like we don't have any questions, so
I don't know if folks can see the contact information I just posted. I think it said to only host and panelists, if that's able to repost to put all that information back into the chat for everybody.
no, in chat it says panelists and attendees. On my end, it is enabled, so they should be able to type and see. Oh, when you were posting,
Mhm.
yes, you posted to panelists.
Okay, so everyone can see that then.
Panelists and attendees. So when you are typing in chat, it says to panelists and attendees. If you choose that. Do you see that?
Well, it's not, because we only have the option to host a panelist and host. So if you're able to, please share that if you can, and then if not, hopefully it could be shared in an email afterwards.
Yes, I just shared that.
Thank you.
So guys, please take a screenshot.
Oh yeah, let's take a picture.
Take note. No, I meant
Oh.
attendees can take a screenshot of all the contact information.
I definitely took a picture too.
Well, do you want me out of the picture?
If you want to be a part of it, I don't mind if you're comfortable.
No. Let me see. So I will pin you and
Ready, y'all? Thanks, Oksana.
end the session. Thank you so much. We don't have questions today, and we have another session starting soon. So thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you all for
Thank you.
attending the session.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you,
you all
everyone.
the attendees. We had quite a lot, so thank you so much for coming and for joining us. Thank you. Bye bye.